Hello, Mitchell here from the Canadian School of Lutherie, and welcome to the second part in this 1920 Gibson mandolin restoration. In the first video I removed the binding. In this video I'm going to be removing the back. I have some water heated up with some tools, and I have my mandolin all clamped up ready to go. So let's get started. I started off with my water around 65 degrees Celsius, but found that the tools were cooling down too fast, so you may want to bring your water to a boil right from the start. Okay, pretty self-explanatory here. You just work your way along the seam between the back and the sides carefully with the palette knife. That's it. Thanks for watching. One thing you'll have to be careful of, I don't know if you just noticed that, but it actually started cracking into the sides as opposed to the back lifting. This will happen from time to time with this method of removal. Not a big deal. Just go ahead of the crack a little bit with another knife and work your way back. Once the back has been separated from the sides in that area, keep going. And here's a close-up shot of the other scenario you'll run into, which is the knife itself cutting into the sides as opposed to following the seam. You'll find this with the thinner knives. They're more likely to cut into the sides than the thicker knives. Approach it the same way, just move ahead a little bit and work your way back. What I found worked best for me was using the smaller knives to cut into the actual seam and then running the larger knife along to coax the back away from the sides. I made up this jig and sized it in the mandolin before I removed the back. This helps keep the sides from warping for the duration of the repair, and it also suspends the mandolin off the bench so I don't have to worry about damaging the top. Now is a good time to go around and remove and reglue any little pieces that may have broken off from either the sides or the back. It doesn't take very long, and it's usually pretty easy to locate where they've come from, so in my opinion, well worth doing. I took a few moments to jot down some measurements. You never know when they might come in handy for a future build or repair. One of the back plates had a crack that needed to be stabilized. I wanted to do this prior to regluing the back itself. I traced the profile of the back onto a piece of plywood and came up with this little clamping collar. Next, you want to go along the crack and make sure it's free of any dust or debris. You can check to make sure that it's fitting nicely just by pushing the crack together. It should be almost invisible if it's fitting together properly. I used hot hide glue for this repair. I found it worked really nice. You actually don't need clamps in some scenarios with hot hide glue, but in this case the joint did require a little bit of coaxing. So while I was waiting for glue to dry, I decided to start working on this small section of kerf lining that needed to be replaced. When I removed the back, one individual section of kerf lining came up with it, which has already been reglued at this point, but two pieces were missing altogether. I removed the bulk of the material with a micro chisel and then cleaned it up with some 120 grit sandpaper. I ended up just using some pre-made Spanish cedar guitar linings for this. Didn't match the color perfectly, but they work great. After the glue on the linings had set, it was time to get the sides cleaned up and sanded flat. Before sanding, I went along the sides with a micro chisel, removing any little bits of glue or pieces of wood that might lead to uneven sanding. I used the StewMac fret leveling bar along with some Norton 180 sandpaper to sand the sides. The bar already had a good amount of weight to it, so I was really just guiding it along. And at the end of the day, I was really just sanding away the glue. The sides were already pretty flat as it is. The obvious danger here is hitting your heel cap, so watch out for that. I slowed the video down at this point just to show that I've removed part of the sandpaper from the bar. This is because the neck block required more sanding and the sides were already finished. So I didn't want to continue to sand the sides, I just wanted to work on the neck block. Now let's see how the crack glued up. And we got a nice amount of squeeze out there. That's a good sign. Now that the crack has been stabilized, we'll be approaching this the same way we did with the sides, removing any excess material in preparation for sanding. Using your chisel as a scraper is a great way of removing any excess glue or wood without running the risk of cutting into your actual workpiece. I used a razor blade for the edge, carefully scraping off any glue. You can tell that you're scraping the glue when the shavings are white. As soon as you start to see some color, it's time to adjust or stop. After scraping away the majority of glue, I took the back plates over to this dish to get them sanded really nice and flat. It is important to get them sanded flat so that when I go to reglue them, that they sit even with each other. However, take care not to sand the back plates too thin. Doing so may result in compromising the structural integrity of the instrument. Check frequently to make sure you're not sanding the back plate too thin. In addition to sanding the face of each back plate, I had to sand the edge as well. Marking the edges with pencil is a great visual indicator of when to stop sanding. Once the pencil's been sanded away, the piece should be straight. I ended up using the leveling bar for this application as well, and it worked great. Just keep in mind that you have to shim the back up so that it doesn't ride along the rounded edge of the bar. In behind the bar you can see two color clamps holding down a piece of 1/4-inch plywood which the back is actually riding on. After I had my seam fitting together nice, I had to make minor adjustments to the height of each plate. I continued to remove small amounts of material until the two back plates sat even with each other. Now we're ready to clamp up the back. I took a straight piece of 1/2-inch plywood, cut it to accept the back, and then I set it on riser blocks. I then made up clamping cowls similar to the one I used earlier to glue up the crack. Don't forget to lay down a strip of wax paper so that you don't glue the back to the plywood. I also recommend that you do a test run with the clamps to make sure you've got all the kinks worked out before you add the glue. For this job, I'm using hot hide glue. And here's a final shot of the embarrassing amount of clamps I've used to glue these two pieces back together. Alright, well that's it for now. If you have any questions about the repair so far, please shoot us an email at canadianschoollutherie@gmail.com, or you can write a comment below, we'll get back to you. If you like the video, please share it, please subscribe to our channel, and hopefully have the next one out in a couple of weeks. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.